Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to show you guys a couple builds on Saryn. So Saryn, if you don't know, she's a pretty cool frame. She's a really good one at that. So what she can do, her passive status effects from your weapons or abilities last 25% longer. Your first ability, spores, you throw spores at the enemies and then they'll form these little globs on them. And whether you break the glob or kill the enemy, it will spread to nearby enemies and continue to do so until there are no more enemies around. Your second ability is kind of like Rolling Guard, where you shed your skin and you leave a little decoy behind you, which will take enemy fire off of you. And with this build, it'll last for 51 seconds, have a good amount of health, and then when it's fully destroyed, it will blow up and do toxin damage. When you hit Molt, one, it has no casting animation or anything like that, it's just instant, but when you activate it, it will also give you a speed boost multiplier. Now, for your 3, when this is active, it will give you toxin damage added to your weapons, and it doubles for your melees. And if the enemy is affected by spores, it will instantly burst the spores. Now, for your 4, anyone affected by spores is more likely to be susceptible to this, but it's a giant poison cloud that you do that'll do viral damage to enemies in your radius. Now, moving into the builds, we have 3. We have a shield tank, a budget setup for if you're newer to Saryn or you just got her from Tennogen or TennoCon, I don't remember which one it was. And then we have a Gloom Helminth health tanking setup. So for our shield tank, we have Brief Respite, which converts 150% of the energy spent on abilities into shields. We have Equilibrium for some more energy, Adaptation for damage resistance, Flow for more energy, Transient Fortitude for strength. We have Prime Continuity for duration, Redirection for some more shielding, and Stretch for more range. We also have Venom Dose, which is an augment for her first ability, that instead of tapping it to throw spores, you hold it and it will give you and all allies within 15 meters an additional 100% corrosive damage to your attacks. Now, one thing I do want to mention, for Arcanes, I have Arcane Reaper here, which if you don't want this, you could just have Molt Augmented, which I have here. But other than this, you want to use Arcane Aegis, which will give you more shield recharge rate. And then if you don't want adaptation, then subsume over your 4th ability subsume over your 4th ability Eclipse from Mirage, specifically for Lunar Eclipse, which will give you built-in adaptation. And then you could swap this out for something like, I don't know, Narrow-Minded and go all ability buffing, or you could go Steel Fiber and go for a little more strength on your damage buffing. Now, for our budget build, we have no arcanes because depending on how early you are, you might not have them. But we have Physique. Really, any aura mod will fit here if it matches the polarity, which is the little icon up in the right. And then we have Flow, Streamline, Continuity, and Stretch. And then we have Energy Nexus, which is between 5 and 10 platinum, I believe, which if you don't have this or don't want to run it, then you can throw on something like Intensify. Now, moving on to our Gloom health tanking setup, you subsume Gloom over Molt, or if you want to, you could subsume it over your 2. Either is fine, or your 4, I mean. Either is fine. I put it over the 2 because this gives us a good amount of sustain. So for our aura mod, we have Physique for more HP, Flow for energy, Overextended for range, Transient Fortitude for some strength, Continuity for duration, triple Umbra mods, which give health, strength, and armor, and Stretch. If you don't want Umbral Fiber, you could just as easily fit in something like Venom Dose and give yourself a little more damage. I don't know, I kind of like having Fiber just for a little bit more damage reduction. And then for here, we have Molt Augmented and Arcane Energize. If you don't like Energize, you could just as easily throw on Reaper, which makes it to where when you get melee kills, you will start health regen, which I'll go ahead and throw it on now. Now, before I go any further, I want to talk about stats for your abilities, because the different builds have different ways these abilities kind of work because of the stat distributions. So for your first ability, your strength will affect the damage when the spores hit the enemy, the damage that they get per enemy affected by it, and then your duration will not really do anything for this ability because it's set at a 10% decay when there's nobody affected by your spores. Range will affect how far you can throw them, and the range they will spread when they blow up, or the enemy's killed and they spread to enemies. Now, for 2, Molt, your strength will affect the health, the damage that it does when it explodes, and the movement speed buff that you get when you use this ability. Your duration will affect how long the decoy stays out and how long you keep your movement speed buff. For Toxic Lash, your strength will affect the extra damage that you gain for your weapons, ranged or melee, and then your duration obviously will affect how long this lasts. Now, for Miasma, your 4th ability, your strength will affect the viral damage that the enemies take, and your duration will obviously increase the duration they are affected by this ability. You can see here we have 7.65 seconds, and then the spores, if they are affected, they will have a 4 times damage multiplier applied to them. Now, for our Gloom setup, Gloom, if you don't know, it does a slow and gives us lifesteal from enemies. Your strength affects how much the enemies are slowed and how big of a lifesteal you get. With this build, we get about 7%. And then your duration will affect how fast your thing grows. The more duration, the bigger it grows. And then your range will affect how big of a size it can grow to, which you can see here, my max is 35 meters at its biggest. And the range increase is 2.5 meters per second that it will increase until it hits maximum. Now, with that all being said, let's jump into the Simulacrum, and I can show you guys how the abilities work. Alrighty, now we are here in the Simulacrum, and I have some Corrupted Heavy Gunners spawned here. So, to show off the abilities, your first ability, you tap it, and you throw. You can see here with these lime green orbs, and then when you shoot those, you'll see they just spread to everybody around, and you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, it says 20 infected, and this number is getting bigger and bigger. We'll shoot a few more of these just to get some more stacks. There you go, and you can see it's just doing corrosive damage to them, and it does a pretty much almost full armor strip. I did some messing around with strength, and I wasn't able to get this to be an actual full armor strip. But it will keep their armor here, and then when they start to regen the armor, it will go right back down. Now, for a second ability, Molt, you leave this clone behind. It'll be invulnerable for a few seconds, and then it will have health and stuff determined by your stats, whether it's with your strength. And then once this decays, I can't do it, it will blow up and do toxin damage in the area. Oh, there we go. When you reactivate, there can only be one at a time. It will blow up and do toxin damage in the area, you can see there. And then our third ability, you can see on my weapon now we have this green ooze coming out of it. This is just a straight up damage buff to our weapons. And then since we have Venom Dose, I can hold this, and up in the top right we have an additional buff. Now our weapons are doing even more damage. And then the enemies affected, you want to hit 4. And now that you can see they have viral damage applied on top of them. And then when we shoot them, they get slash and toxin from our abilities. So they're taking corrosive, viral, and toxin damage all at the same time. And then depending on your weapons, this one does a little bit of slash. And then now we'll go in here and swap over to our Gloom setup so I can show you how Gloom works if you don't know. So Gloom, I'll activate it back here so that we don't get any leakage onto the enemies. So Gloom, you can see it's this little area, and then you can see it spreading out there, up the platform. And it will continue to spread until it hits max radius, which you can see on the wall it's still going, and here's our max radius, 35 meters, which I can come up here in the air. And you can see here, 35 meters all the way around here, which is almost the entire Simulacrum. But now you can see we'll walk our energy. We have none being used because there's no enemies in the radius. And now we'll walk closer, and you can see my energy starts to go down the more enemies that I get in this circle. Now it does cap out at I believe 6 no matter how many enemies are in the radius. But this gives us lifesteal, and it also slows down the enemies while they're affected by it. And you can tell they are by this giant green and black aura, which will be whatever color your Warframe is. But this just drains energy, gives us lifesteal, so that when we kill them, we get some HP back, and everything like that. So with that being said, let's take these two builds into a mission, and I will show you them in action. Alright, now we are here in Steel Path, so that I can show you guys this build. And we are on a survival mission, so all the enemies come straight for me, and we are on our health tanking setup. So let me let these guys hit me a little, and then you can see right there up in the top right, we gain a ton of HP back. Let's activate Toxic Lash. There we go. Because we have 7% lifesteal, we can just infinitely take our HP back as long as you have ammo. And you can just sit here and face tank everything. And Gloom is slowing them down and everything like that, which now it's off because I got energy ripped. But as long as you don't get your energy completely yoinked out of you like that, you could pretty much survive infinitely, because it doesn't use energy unless there are enemies in the circle. There we go. Let's activate Gloom again. Get our HP back. You can see we went from 16 to completely full with one shot from that guy. Which I think Burst On's a really good weapon to use with Gloom as well, because of the fact that it shoots 3 shots. And it's 7% on each shot on each enemy. Which I'm not sure. I don't think this weapon has punch through on it. At least with this build, I don't think it does. Get rid of the guy's arms. There we go. You could also, if you're having issues with energy, I'm solo right now, so I don't like have any teammates to get energy from or anything like that. You could also throw on something like Energy Nexus as well as adaptation, so that you can have just constant energy per second on top of, I'm using Xeneric for just even more energy per second, which is nice to have. But that's kind of the loop for this build. I don't personally make use of her 1 and 4 very often, because I just don't use, I forget to use them a lot of the time. I'd rather just keep all my energy on Gloom and my damage buff. But if you, you should be using her 1 and 4 to spread for even more damage. But I just forget to use them very often, so I just put all of her energy into Gloom and Toxic Lash / Venom Dose, or both, just to purely keep up those all the time. But yeah, that's this build. Now we'll go back to our Orbiter, and we will switch over to our shield tanking setup, and I can show you guys that. Alright, now we are back. We are on a shield tanking setup now. You can see in the bottom right, we have Molt instead of Gloom. So this one plays differently in the way of you want to constantly be spamming your abilities to keep your shields going. Whether it's Spores or Miasma or anything like that, you just want to be spamming as much as you can to keep your shields going. Because the more abilities you hit, the more shield you have, basically. And then we do have Venom Dose here as well. But being out of energy is a big problem. So you could slap on something like Energy Nexus if you want, instead of Equilibrium, just to give you some overtime energy, so that you can keep your energy up, because if it goes down, so does your survivability. Exhibit A. But this setup, ideally, you're not solo, because you want to have teammates to kind of bounce your energy off of. Because solo, the only energy you get is what you make. And when you want 2 weapon buffs and spamming your Spores all at the same time, it can get pretty energy intensive. So we'll go ahead and activate Toxic Lash. Do that. Hit a little roll. Throw out another Xeneric. But this build is a much more active playstyle than the Gloom. The Gloom, you could honestly almost AFK with it if you have teammates and things. And if you want for either of these setups, you could subsume your 4 for Nourish, which I would do it more for the Gloom tank, or the Gloom health tank, because you'll just have so much energy with that one if you're playing with teammates rather than alone, that you really can get away with subsuming off your 4 and just focusing more like solely on weapons and Gloom. Let's go ahead and activate Venom Dose, hit a Molt, so they're shooting that instead of me. Now, in Steel Path, I imagine your Molt won't last. Yeah, you see it blew up there, so we'll drop another. Throw out Xeneric. Activate our Incarnon and Venom Lash. There we go. We'll go ahead and Molt, and we'll go grab some life support. Alrighty. Now we have some more life support going. We can activate Venom Lash and Toxic Dose again, so that we get more damage going. And then we'll drop our Molt so that we can get rid of this guy because he's a pain. We'll roll in and hit a Mercy on him. There we go. spray some more damage, drop a clone, throw some spores out, drop another clone so that one does some toxin damage to everybody over there. I should actually head towards the life support rather than away from it, actually. Let's go ahead and get this. Here we are. Molt again, so that they focus that instead of us. Let's get a Zeneric active again. But, as you can see, this one's a much more involved build compared to Gloom, which is a much more, like, you could relax more with that one comparatively. Because this one, you basically want to spam all the time to keep Brief Respite and your just shield up all the time. Whether it's through Molt, which gives you some invulnerability, or keeping your weapon buffs active. So that you can keep your damage up, so that you can keep obliterating these enemies. But yeah. That's pretty much my two builds for Saryn, the budget, the health tank, and the shield tank. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.